It is the longest river in France. It rises deep in the heart of the country, heads north, swings west. In one sense, the River Loire divides France into two. It is a sort of frontier between the north and the warmth which stems upwards from the Mediterranean. Two different mentalities meet here. But in another way, it is a special world of its own. A world of sleepy villages, farmhouses with lazy smoking chimneys, rich untidy flower gardens, mistletoe clinging to the tree branches. A self-sufficient, tranquil world. A land of mists and pastel colors, and yet a country with an ancient history. The Loire is famous for its castles. Some are from the Middle Ages, grim fortresses built for war, like the castle at Angers or the Château de Luynes, which dominates the little town clustered beneath its walls. Then, in the 14th century, came the Italian Renaissance, and after that, architecture was never the same again. Chambord, where the Renaissance builders fashioned a fantastic lacework of gables and pinnacles, rises like some fairy tale castle out of river and parkland. Azay les Rideaux, another masterpiece of the Renaissance, a poem in stone set in the waters of the River Indre. Cheverny, completed in 1634, is one of the very few chateaux to retain its original, lavishly ornate interior furnishings in the style of Louis XV. The first floor is given over to what are known as the King's Apartments. These rooms contain some exquisite tapestries and paintings. The Chateau of Saumur today. The Chateau of Saumur in the 15th century. This picture, painted for one of the Dukes of Anjou, depicts the vendange, the grape harvest on the estates surrounding the castle walls. For then, as now, the Loire Valley was one of the great wine regions of France. Traditionally, the wine-producing area of the Loire is divided into three regions known by their ancient names. Touraine, with its wealth of chateaux. The historic region of Anjou and Saumur. Nearest the coast is the Pays Nantais, a country of gently undulating hills and valleys, where the vines run almost to the seacoast. From early in the year, right through spring and summer, work goes on in the Loire vineyards. The vines must be weeded, trained, pruned, sprayed to eliminate pests and diseases. Throughout the summer, every day of sunshine increases the sugar in the grapes. Indeed, the white Chenin grape will often develop pourriture noble, literally noble rot, greatly enriching the sugar of the grape and the flavor of the sweet wines of Coteaux du Layon and Vouvray. The vendange begins at the coast in the Pays Nantais. where the influence of the sea and the Gulf Stream give a moderate, mild climate. By later autumn, harvesting is in full swing throughout all of the regions of the Loire. Methods range from the traditional horse and cart to the most up-to-date in the world. Loire wine is sometimes made by individual farmers, but in some areas the grapes may be brought to vast cooperatives run by committees of local vine growers with all the latest in technology to make wine hygienically and economically. Many small vineyard owners bring their grapes here. Larger vineyards have their own presses and make their wine at their own premises. White grapes like these are normally pressed immediately on arrival at the press house. It is the juice that flows naturally from the grapes under little or no pressure that makes the best wine. As well as white wine, the Loire vineyards produce a great deal of rosé and red. Like this particular winery in Touraine, there is a mistaken idea that rosé wine is made with a mixture of red and white grapes, but this is not the case. In the making of red or rosé wine, the grapes are not pressed immediately, as is the case with white wine. The stems are first removed. They tend to give a bitter flavor to the wine. Then the grapes are crushed, and the skins and juice remain together in vats. This is a red grape, a cabernet, yet its juice is quite clear and colorless. It is in fact the grape's skins which impart the color to the wine. And whether the result is a rosé or red wine depends on just how long the skins and juice stay together in contact. Not all the wine of the Loire is made by machinery. A very little is made by the old methods. This particular vineyard owner still crushes some of his grapes by treading. He does it just to amuse his family and friends and to preserve the old traditional ways. A 100-year-old wooden wine press is kept in good working order by a few retired vineyard workers who use it to make enough wine for their own consumption. One of the wine regions of the Loire, Touraine, is centered on Tours, a town which suffered great damage in the fighting of the last war. Today, this beautiful, historic city is being painstakingly restored, with care and affection, to something like its former self. In fact, the whole of Touraine has a multitude of associations with the past. The Château de Sachet, where Balzac lived and wrote many of his novels. And La Devinière, the farmhouse home of Rabelais, the earthy writer from the 16th century. The vine was cultivated in Touraine before the 8th century AD. Many of her villages and towns produce their own wine. Some are famous. Bourgdeill is one such. Around its 12th century abbey, the cabernet vines of Bourgdeill stretch out. The vineyards of the appellation Touraine Rouge are centered on the town of Amboise. On the Vienne, a tributary of the Loire, stands the medieval city of Chinon. Above the city, her vineyards extend right up to the ancient castle walls. Below the town, in the quiet coolness of the cave cellars which are found along the riverbank, the wines of Chinon rest and mature. For part of its travel, the Loire passes between steep banks honeycombed with caves. Many people live in them, les troglodytes, as the French call them. There are whole streets of these dwellings with the facades of normal houses and spacious cave rooms behind. Vouvray, nearby, has its share of them. The little town of Vouvray, a famous name among the Loire wines, nestles low beside the river. The spire of its church is all that can be seen from the vineyards spreading along the heights above. Many of the caves here are given over to winemaking, for the constant temperature and humidity make them ideal for this purpose. In one lies this old press, dating from the 16th century. But even so, the wine they make there was famous for countless years before it was built. In a tasting room carved deep down in the living rock, the wines are poured for sampling. Vouvray is a white wine. It has a natural tendency to sparkle, and much Vouvray is turned into sparkling wine by the champagne method. It is best drunk when it is 8 to 10 years old, but it will continue to grow in flavor and bouquet for a great deal longer. In the Abbey of Fontevraud lie the bodies of the Plantagenets. Our own Henry II, his wife Eleanor of Aquitaine, and their son Richard, King of England, Crusader, the Lionheart. They rest here in the quietness of a royal abbey founded 900 years ago. For the Plantagenets were not only kings of England, they were counts of Anjou too, and ruled much of the Loire lands. This, the region of Anjou and Saumur, is the next wine-growing area of the Loire. It is a fascinating region with much character, where windmills can still be found grinding corn amid the growing vines. Sometimes in Anjou and Saumur, the vineyards will be enclosed by walls. The grape they are picking is cabernet, widely grown in this region for producing wines such as Cabernet d'Anjou. There is a white wine too. Saumur white wine is similar to that of neighboring Vouvray, and like Vouvray, sparkling Saumur is made in the same way as champagne, by the méthode champenoise. In this process, a yeast solution is added to the wine, causing a second fermentation. The bottles are stored in caves, neck downwards. Every day they are rotated a quarter of a turn, a process called the remuage. A certain amount of yeast sediment forms in the wine bottle, and the rotation of the remuage causes it to work down into the neck of the bottle. After some months, the bottlenecks are refrigerated, and it is possible to remove the lump of frozen wine containing the sediment. They are then topped up with a mixture of old wine and sugar. Rosé d'Anjou, light and semi-sweet, is one of the best rosé wines of France. Rosé d'Anjou and its drier companion, Rosé de Loire, are shipped all over the world. On the banks of a small tributary of the Loire, the Layon, another of the outstanding wines of France, is produced. These vineyards yield the wine known as Coteaux du Layon. After a long, slow fermentation, the result is a mellow, sweet wine, ideal as an aperitif. Coteaux du Layon is best kept for at least 10 years. As it matures, it becomes smoother and richer. And as it ages, the magnificent golden color of the wine gradually deepens. The most westerly region of the Loire vineyards, the Pays Nantais, is focused on the port of Nantes. Here the Loire is reaching the end of its long journey. The sea is now very close. The cliffs have gone. The countryside has changed again. Between the gently rolling hills and valleys are set a number of little villages. They make two wines, both white, in the Pays Nantais. Gros Plan, made from the Folle Blanche grape, and Muscadet from the Melon grape. These grapes are never allowed to become overripe. There is no pourriture noble in the Nantais region. From mid-September onwards, the vines are brought to the cellars and the juice pressed. The new wine is left to ferment in casks. This is the rapid fermentation of the first few days, what the winemakers call the tumultuous fermentation. The carved beam ends of this cellar represent the 7 deadly sins and the virtues. The vineyards of the Pays Nantais extend to the Brittany coast. In every inlet and harbour there is a small fishing village, each with its own fleet of vessels. Wine is the result of the type of grape, the soil, the character of the land, and the influence of climate. In short, a product of its environment. So most wines naturally suit the foods of their own region. This is so with the wines of the Pays Nantais. Light, dry, and fruity, they perfectly complement the shellfish and seafoods, specialities of this coast. They serve the rosé wine of Anjou with charcuterie at a restaurant overlooking the river in Anjou and Saumur. A white wine with fish from the Loire. Chicken and a red wine, Saumur Champigny. And with the fruit, the perfect accompaniment is one of the sparkling wines of the region. Touraine, like the rest of the Loire, produces a full range of wines. But this region makes more of the full-bodied red wines, admirable with the delicious goat's cheeses of the region, and the 2 pork delicacies of Touraine, Rion and Rillette. To those engaged in it, winemaking is far more than just a simple occupation. It is a way of life to which they are dedicated, a continuing search for better standards, a quest for higher and yet higher quality. In the Middle Ages, the wine business, like other industries, was governed by a system of guilds. These have been perpetuated to the present day. And like the Chevalier de la Chantepleur, they still meet dressed in their medieval robes. From the 12th century cloisters of Saint-Jean in Angers, the Confrérie des Chevaliers du Sacavin march in procession. This, the most ancient of all the French wine guilds, reckon among the early grand masters of their order none other than the famous Rabelais himself. The Chateau of Goulaine in the Pays Nantais, last to be built of the Renaissance chateau, and once home of the Dukes of Brittany. Within the chateau, the Chevalier de Brettevin hold court to examine and approve a new candidate. Membership of these orders is eagerly sought, and to hold office in one of the wine guilds is to receive the highest honors the industry can bestow. The tradition of winemaking in this, the Pays Nantais, is very ancient, for in the 16th century hers were the only vineyards existing in Brittany. Everyone, from guild grandmaster to the humblest field worker, share this involvement with their work, are happy to discuss the conditions of the vineyards and the quality of the vintage. The harvest over, they relax with their friends over a glass of wine. Outside, the vineyards remain as a reminder of yet another year of work to come. The river sinks into a quiet haze. An autumn of pale golden sunshine. The Loire rests quiet and tranquil until another spring.